Oké, een fijne namiddag hier in België. Bon après-midi pour les gens en Belgique. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon for the people in Belgium, or good evening for maybe some people in the Philippines or elsewhere. Mijn naam is Johan. Je m'appelle Johan. Et voilà, ik zal dit proberen in goede banen te leiden. Maar eerst en vooral, wat betreft taal, we gaan het in het Engels doen. Donc, on va parler en anglais. Hein? Maar er is vertaling. Dus voor de mensen op Zoom, als je klikt bij more, meer opties, bij interpretaties of interpretations, kun je de taal, kun je een tolk hebben, een vertaler. Daar moet je German op klikken. Dat is dan Nederlands-Engels. Pour les gens qui parlent français, il y a aussi de traduction entre français et anglais, parce qu'on va parler en anglais. Et pour ça, tu dois aller aux des options, interprétation français, French. Okay. So now, hopefully, I can continue just in English. And all of you can understand me. If not, give a sign in the chat. S'il y a des problèmes, donne een coup de vies dans le chat. Als er een probleem is, kun je naar de chat iets zeggen. Dus I will be your host for this webinar. The webinar is entitled How to Claim Your Rights in a Corona-Proof Way, organized by Intel and Viva Salud. I'm also an Intel member already for a long time, and I also support Viva Salud. I'm member of Intel Brussels, Philippines, so I'm in the Philippines work group. And we have for you guys today 3 guest speakers, 2 from Belgium and 1 from the Philippines. I will introduce them shortly, but I will let them give their more longer and better introduction. So we have first Sophia, who is also a member of Intel. She is a member of Intel Ghent, if I'm not mistaken, and she's mostly focused on Palestine, the work group on Palestine. And we have also Jan, who is a student of political sciences, I think also based in Ghent. And he is a member of Students for Climate. So he will explain that also in a bit. And last but certainly not least, we have Joanne Salvador, who is the Deputy Secretary General of Gabriela, which is a women's movement in the Philippines. So I will also let her introduce herself. Yeah, we can maybe start with you, Joanne. Can you hear me? Can you answer? Can you introduce yourself to our listeners, our viewers?
Hi, Johan. Thank you, Intel and Viva Salud, for organizing this webinar and for inviting us to be part of this. And I'm happy to be sharing our experience here in the Philippines. So my name is Joanne, and I work with Gabriela. As Johan said, it's a women's organization here in the Philippines, but we also have members outside of the Philippines because there are many Filipino women working abroad. So as of now, for example, we have at least 12 chapters and organizing groups in different countries outside of the Philippines. Yeah, so I've been working with Gabriela since I think 2004, and I have visited Intel for several times when I go to Europe. There are opportunities for sharing also, and I've met a lot of Intel members also here in the Philippines when they visit. Yeah, so I think that's it for now. I will talk about my organization and our activities more later.
Yes, thank you very much, Joanne, and welcome to join us here this afternoon. Next up, I'll give the word to Sophia. Sophia, can you tell us a bit more about yourself?
Hi, Johan. Thank you also for inviting me as the representative of Intel to speak during this webinar. So I'm also a member of Intel Globalized Solidarity, like you mentioned. I'm mostly active in the Intel Ghent group. We work on several topics. Now we are in the midst of a BDS campaign, of which I'm going to talk more about later. But we also, I'm going to introduce Intel as well later on, more specifically. But for me, myself, I got engaged I was more interested in the Palestinian question and the conflict between Palestinian and Israeli. That's why I joined Intel, because it's a movement for international solidarity. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Sophia. And yes, indeed, we will introduce Intel a bit more a bit later, and also some of, or at least one campaign in specific. And lastly, I'll give the word to Jan. Jan, can you introduce yourself to our viewers?
Yeah, but also I want to first thank you for setting up the event and all the viewers for watching and so forth, and the speakers attending. But yeah, so my name is Jan. I'm a student, and you know, just as many students, I started marching in the school strikes in 2019, and yeah, after a while, I started volunteering for Students for Climate. So Students for Climate is an organization that was founded like in the weeks after the start of the school strikes, which were started by the strikers from the high school students, right? Youth for Climate, really, they were the heart and the mobilizing heart of the school strikes. And eventually students from universities across Belgium thought, okay, we clearly need to join this too and show that we too are behind this, and we need to be there and mobilize for these marches. So that's how Students for Climate was founded. And eventually they started organizing their own actions also, and working together with many different organizations on all sorts of climate actions, and increasingly also on the social issue, right? We'll talk about it, just because we found that you cannot talk about climate justice without social justice. I mean, this was like more and more so evident. So that's what Students for Climate, I think, has been increasingly doing. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Jan, for your introduction. Later on, when I give the word again to you guys, you can still elaborate on your organizations or certain campaigns that you're working on, of course. Now, I will just do a quick introduction of the organizers. I mentioned them already, Intel and Viva Salud. Intel is a movement, a Belgian movement that consists of volunteers. And it's a movement on North-South solidarity. We try to support social movements in other countries. We have working groups on the Philippines, Congo, Palestine, Latin America, and also the greater Middle East. And in those regions, we have certain partners, and we try to support them in different ways from here, from Belgium. We organize activities. We do film showings, we do debates, and of course, we also do actions online, or my preference, offline. We'll talk about that later, which is the theme of our webinar. I want to focus on one campaign specifically of Intel, just very short, because Sophia is much better in giving a better explanation of this campaign. It is the AXA campaign. AXA is like a bank here in Europe. I think it's French, if I'm not mistaken. And AXA, we have a campaign against the collaboration of AXA and certain Israeli banks who are connected with illegal occupation in Palestine. So this is the gist of the campaign. But later on, I hope Sophia can give a better, more elaborate explanation. Secondly, we have Viva Salud co-organizing this. I want to give already a thank you to our technical staff, Nikki, who is working for Viva Salud. So she's making sure that you guys can hear me and etc., etc. Viva Salud is an NGO. It's a Flemish NGO that focuses on health issues with partners also in developing countries. Health issues in the broad sense of health. So it's just not about I have a fever and or I have tuberculosis. Is there a doctor? You know, it's the broad sense about is there healthcare accessible in those regions, and if not, why not? What are the reasons why not, and what can the movements there do, and what can an NGO like Viva Salud do to support these movements? I want to also specify one campaign of Viva Salud this year, which is the campaign Only Fighters Win. We try to support certain individuals, but of course also the organizations where they're in this specific period. In this time of pandemic, it is much more difficult to fight for your rights. And this is why Viva Salud made up this campaign, Only Fighters Win. Hopefully people can support this campaign. You can read about this campaign on the website. We will try to put the link in the chat. And also to support the campaign financially, we also are selling mouth masks. Too bad I don't have one to show you right now, but in the link, hopefully there will be more information about that also. There is also a WhatsApp group of Viva Salud where if you want, you can be a member of. And in that way, you can be updated weekly on what's going on with a partner of Viva Salud. What are they doing? So that might be interesting. We'll put the link also of that WhatsApp group in the chat. I would also like to mention a campaign of ELF or 11-11-11, which is the umbrella organization of all NGOs on the Flemish side, the Dutch-speaking side of Belgium. They have a campaign called Defend the Defenders. Wait, let me double check that. No, sorry, it's not Defend the Defenders. That's something else. I will talk about that later. But it's Changemakers. They have a campaign on Changemakers this year. Because they have noticed also that the space where social movements can function, can exist, is becoming smaller and smaller. And this is very dangerous, not just for democracy, but also for the living conditions of the people in these regions. It's actually quite a worldwide phenomenon. So I think 11-11-11 is the best place to put up a campaign like this. Because they have a lot of partners, NGOs from here and NGOs from other countries. All right, for those who are a bit late, maybe we have some of those people, viewers here. I would just like to remind you, there is a translation. So this will be all in English, this webinar on how to claim your rights in a corona-proof way. But if you click on more and then interpretation, you can choose French for French and German for Nederlands, Dutch. And again, I would like to remind you, later on, the viewers will have the opportunity to ask questions, but you can already post your questions in the Q&A, which is also, you can see it normally on your Zoom. So Q&A is for the questions, and we'll hopefully be able to answer most of your questions. And if you have things to share, interesting links, you can always post them also on the chat. So there's also a chat function here in Zoom. All right, I have done all my introductions, and I would now go over to the next phase of this webinar, where we let each of the speakers speak. Speakers, I would like you to answer a question. First off, you can also, of course, give a more elaborate introduction of your organization if you wish to, or of a campaign. And the question is, which activities have you recently organized in these times of lockdown? And how did you handle this? How did you come about to be able to put up such an activity, and how did you make it corona-proof? So that is the main question for this round. I suggest, Sophia, would you like to begin?
Hi, yeah, no problem at all. As you've already introduced Intel, I just want to add a couple of things. Like you said, we are a movement for international solidarity. We are active in different cities in Belgium, not only in Brussels, but also in Ghent, Leuven, and Antwerp. And we work around teams and topics. The main focus is, like I said, the international solidarity. And what we want is, we want change, and we believe it comes from the people. And that's why the main thing we do is raise awareness among population with training, conferences, film debate evenings, but also we mobilize people and for action in the different cities. And for example, for the Palestine group, we are working with BDS campaigns. And so the BDS movement, the boycott, disinvestment and sanction movement, its main objective is to end the international support for Israel oppression of Palestinians, and pressure Israel to comply with international law. And in this case, we are working on the EXA campaign, as you've mentioned. And this is a campaign that is coordinated on a European level with a coalition where several BDS members of Europe are in to discuss how we're going to do this campaign. And so before, I want to take this as an example for how we change our strategy during the COVID crisis, and what were our activities. So what we did was we had this whole campaign plan before the lockdown. We had our plan to go to France, to the General Assembly. But before I talk about the activities, perhaps more about AXA, I'm sorry for the confusion. So, but why do we tackle AXA? Why do we want to pressure AXA? As you mentioned, AXA is a bank, but also an insurance company. It's the largest insurance company, the second biggest in Europe. And although AXA has human rights and environment policies, it still invests like $7 million in 3 Israeli banks that are named in a United Nations database of companies that are involved in the illegal settlements. Basically, this means that without these banks, the illegal Israeli settlements project would be much more difficult to accomplish. Besides that, AXA also owns 9% of Equitable Holdings. This is, it's a holding which invests $157 million in 5 Israeli banks, as well as Israel's largest arms company, Elbit System. So with this coalition of Stop AXA Assistance to Israeli Apartheid, that's the name, with this campaign, we call on individuals, organizations, but also institutions worldwide to boycott AXA until it ends its complicity with Israelis' apartheid and human rights violation. More information, I guess, you can find in the chat box, because there's a volunteer, Fiona, who is putting this link of our petition online. Certainly have a look at it. But like I said, we had our plan before COVID, and then COVID happened, and everyone was everyone was locked in. It had an impact on our daily lives. So activism became a bit more difficult to do on the streets. As I said, we had this idea and plans of also doing conferences, film screenings, go on the streets to AXA offices, but this wasn't possible anymore and wasn't allowed anymore. So COVID crisis was actually a challenge to continue do activism, but it was an opportunity because it's learned how to be more active for us on online platforms. For example, we learned to create awareness through webinars. We organized a webinar together with the coordination of the European BDS Coalition, and it was promoted all over Europe. And one of the speakers that was invited was the coordinatrix of the BDS movement itself. And beside that, it was also possible now to let a Palestinian from Palestine use their own voice to come and speak about the situation in Palestine and about the apartheid. So in that case, we invited Fayrouz Sharqawi from the Palestinian organization Grassroots Al-Quds to come and talk. These kind of things would be more complicated for physical conferences, not only because of financial reasons. We are a non-profit organization that is working with volunteers, etc., but also for logistic reasons. What about visas and stuff like that? So it was really an opportunity to have this kind of webinars. We also became more familiar with using social media for our campaigns. For example, we made videos of famous human rights activists that support our campaign and called for action, such as Chiara Bodini from the People Health Movement. And there was also a Belgian music singer group, a famous Belgian music singer group, Côte Rouge, who did the same. And these videos were published daily on different social medias. So this was the kind of things we did during the lockdown. But from the moment it was allowed, we went back on the streets and we went to the AXA offices to distribute letters to clients and staffs whenever it was possible. We did this respecting the COVID measures. So when we came up on the streets, we respected the social distancing, we wore masks. So because going on the streets still remains an important aspect of activism, to make sure that the voice of the people is still heard. Yeah, so that's a bit of a summary for what we did for the AXA campaign, what were our activities. And if there are questions, I can elaborate more on that for sure.
All right, yeah, thank you very much, Sophia. And I think a fun fact, but correct me if I'm wrong, could it be that also recently maybe members of Intal or people working in Viva Salud or the nonprofit org itself stopped its link with AXA, like people who are you know, had an account or were connected with AXA have stopped this? Is that correct, Sophia?
I saw this morning a video of the director of Viva Salud who stopped their insurance with the AXA company. So it definitely is doing, it has some consequences. So we hope we can put pressure with this kind of with this petition to aware more people and to actually convince AXA to stop these investments in Israeli banks, for sure. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. I hope they feel the heat. All right, thanks a lot, Sophia. I would like to move on to our next guest speaker. So same question. You can elaborate on your movement and how did you guys handle the lockdown? In what way did that influence your actions, your activism, and how were you able to put up actions during these times of pandemic? And I give this question to Jan. Is that okay?
Yep, definitely. Yeah, well, what to do during the lockdown was quite a challenge to solve for students for climate, especially. I think we experienced right when the lockdown started that we had been a very real organization in the sense that we had existed mainly concretely when students came together on campus to plan actions and to do actions and in the streets. And then suddenly there was the lockdown and campus didn't exist anymore. So our main arena of action and coming together was gone. So, you know, and we had because of our history, like where we emerged within these wave of protests, we had perhaps less organizing capacity for just online stuff. But indeed, yeah, we were kind of confronted with that was what was left, especially in the initial months of the lockdown. So if I look back now at what we did in that time, I see that we mainly tried to work together with other organizations and amplify their voices, or just work together to set up their actions, and yeah, to share news and make the bridge or the connection with the pandemic and all the inequalities that it was revealing, and to try to amplify the voices of the healthcare sector and of essential workers, you know, when that was one of the big insights or lessons from the pandemic. So we tried to do something with that, of course. But then, of course, after a while, yeah, there was the moment to do actions again. And it's clear, like, we haven't been doing many specifically climate actions, like as in Students for Climates, who organizes climate protests specifically, but we have been doing that in collaboration with other organizations. But yeah, it's still been mainly a story of online, and that's been clearly kind of hard. I see that we have been doing some webinars. There's another one this evening, actually, hosted by Students for Climate Leuven, if anyone's interested. Yeah, it's clear that maybe as a little bit less professional organization and some others here, it was definitely a challenge. Yeah, maybe even more so than for you guys. If that answers the question, or if you have additional questions.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that you kind of try to use the situation to improve certain things, like maybe collaborating with other organizations who are also having a tough time. Yeah, it's not the easiest time for actions. It certainly is not, and it's a good opportunity to get to know each other and to maybe combine our strengths to yeah, do things, to still be out there, to still be visible for people, to still have a voice to use in these times. Yeah, thank you very much, Jan. Next up, same question, but the answer might be a bit different because the context will be also very different from Jan and Sophia's. We talked about with Jan and Sophia, how do they experience the difficulties of putting up corona-proof actions here in Belgium, but what about in a country like the Philippines? So we will move now to our guest speaker, Joan Salvador. How is Gabriela coping in this situation in these times? And are you still able to put up any actions online or maybe offline also?
Yes, thank you, Johan.
Joanne.
Thank you. I actually prepared a presentation. If I may share my screen. How do I do that? Let me check. Actually, it's a bit, for us, it's really very different, you know, the context, because one, we have right now the most militarized lockdown, as we say, and also at the same time the longest lockdown in the world. So normally Gabriela would be doing a lot of going to share, yeah, and a lot of education, organizing and mobilizing. So most of our time spent in the communities, in schools, outside of the office. But because of the lockdown, many of us actually are now have to deal with things like we have to learn the internet, we have to learn how to navigate technology. But then again, as we are all have to deal with this kind of situation, it's also an opportunity for us to be more creative and to learn things from each other also. And actually, many of us are now connecting with our international networks abroad, because it's easier now with online and webinars and communication. So, but still, of course, doesn't beat the personal and face-to-face activities, no? So before the government actually declared lockdown here in the Philippines, we immediately had to prepare our members and communities to take action. That's because we know that we cannot depend on our government in terms of protecting us from the virus, in terms of responding to the virus, and also in terms of really having a plan on how to deal, on how to ensure that the country is able to deal with the pandemic. So what we did immediately was to go to the communities, informed our communities, mobilized our members to provide education and information about COVID-19 and how to keep themselves and their families corona-free or virus-free. Because we don't really hear a lot of scientific, what I call scientific and cohesive and comprehensive information from the government. So most of the time, we only hear information from the police or military. And for example, when wearing a mask, they would say that you have to wear your mask out, otherwise you will be arrested. It's not because you have to keep yourself healthy or protect the people around you. So this one also, we had to immediately set up community kitchens, also relief operations, and put up vegetable gardens inside communities to help feed and sustain the community. Because even though there were relief operations or aid from the government, still not enough. And also, it took a while for a lot of local government units and for the national government to really provide food for the communities. So because all work had to stop, a lot of the people, especially in urban poor communities and peasant communities, are not allowed to go out. So they couldn't work, they couldn't earn, especially those who are depending on the daily earnings for their family. So we had to put together all our resources, mobilize the resources that we have in the community to provide immediate food and relief for the workers and also the people. So you see here in the photo, for example, many of the jeepney drivers who used to go out every day to earn money had to stop driving. So jeepney is our local transportation here. So many of them, their families went hungry and depended a lot on relief from private institutions like Gabriela. And also we had to also reach out to women who knew how to sew or make, who used to, I don't know, who used to make clothes, but now because they cannot go to the factories or to to go to work, we mobilized them to make face masks, PPEs, and other needs in their communities. And then, of course, we immediately mobilized them to organize community cleanup and disinfection activities. The idea of this is that the community is something that you have to protect, not just your person or your personal interest, not just your family, because it's a community affair. So all these solidarity activities we have to do, also trying to explain to the people that these are actually things that the government should have done before the pandemic. They should have provided. We already knew January that there will be a virus, or there's a virus that might affect us. But unfortunately, we've been telling the government to prepare for it. Unfortunately, it's not part of their consciousness. So we told the people this is something that we can do as a community, as an organization. But at the same time, this is also something that we should demand from the government. We should demand accountability and for the government to really do something. So it was also an opportunity, for Gabriela, for communities, for many people and organizations to really build alliances and build unity and solidarity among communities and people. So a lot of the things that we actually provided for the communities came from other organizations. They also came from private individuals, many of whom even don't have a lot, but we put together what little we have, especially, for example, the farmers who couldn't go to the market and sell their produce. What they did was to go to the communities as organizations that they can sell their produce at a lower price. So we are able to buy them at a lower price. They are not able to sell them. And then we can provide food for the community. So it's mostly like building solidarity among people, especially the poor people. And then, of course, we always say that, normally we'd be doing online or face-to-face counseling for victims of violence against women. We'd be doing education activities on violence against women and abuse and women's rights. So we couldn't stop these services for the women because we found out that early on during the lockdown here, there was a spike in terms of cases, the number of cases of violence against women, and also it got worse in different forms and in different phases. At the same time also, we had a lot of report from women and from families in communities who were either harassed or who were either abused by the military or police who are manning the checkpoints in communities. So we opened up our violence against women services or counseling services, but we had to do it online. So what we did was to really learn how to navigate the online world so that we can provide services and education to women, asking about abuse, asking help, asking response from Gabriela on how to, how are they, what are they going to do if they are being abused. So of course we had to do this safely because online also we had to be very careful with our security. Yeah. So, and then come September and October, the opening classes started. I think it started October 5. And still, the government had lots of months to prepare for the education opening of classes. And in the new normal, we would have online classes and module-based classes. Unfortunately, again, the Department of Education here is not able to provide enough materials and support both for teachers, for the parents, and for the students. So what we did was to ask volunteers, especially from Gabriela Youth and other youth, young people who are able to get out of their houses, to provide tutorial sessions both for the parents and the students. Tutorial in their how to use online for their classes, the technology for their classes. At the same time, because most of the mothers here did not finish school. So if I am a mother, for example, who just finished grade 5 or 5th grade, and I have a high school student, how am I going to support him or her? How am I going to support my child in her education? So what we did is to provide the tutorial for the mother and for the students. So it's like a review of all the classes that they did or lessons that they did in high school. Some organizations also, for example, children's organizations here like Salim Lahi and Children's Rehabilitation Center, they are putting up now what they call education hub, where students can connect to the internet for free, and then they will also provide free printing for their modules, because most of the students who are not able to afford printing, or who are not able to afford load or for their internet, then they will be, if there's no help or support from outside, they will all be left behind. So also, while doing all this services work and responding to the needs of our community, we had to assert our democratic rights to protest and demand accountability from the government. And of course, we had to immediately ask them, you have to change what you are doing right now. We had to have immediate government reforms to have a cohesive, comprehensive health plan, health response to a health crisis. So because early on, we already knew that they're not taking this on as a health crisis. The government has taken this on as a security crisis. So most of their plans we couldn't even understand. That's why they only what we only found knew and saw immediately was the deployment of thousands of police and military in our communities, locking down communities, not allowing people to go out or even to go to work, and then arresting those who are just getting fresh air from outside, telling them that you cannot go outside without masks. Of course, we understand that these measures like masks, social distancing are important, but they're not comprehensively and cohesively explained to the people as part of a health plan. So these activities that we did, actually, we had to be very strict and creative in terms of when we do outside activities and demonstrations. So yeah, during the pandemic, asserting democratic rights like freedom of speech, freedom to protest, it takes a lot of creativity and careful planning. So the photo here that you see, for example, this is the action inside the University of the Philippines. So you see, we were very strict with social distancing. We were very strict with masks. What we had to follow health protocols. Yeah. So this one too, because we also part of the movement also are health workers, and of course we always inform them that we are going to do this action. So they would remind us that be very strict with the health protocol. Always make sure everybody wears a mask. Make sure that no vulnerable person, pregnant or elderly or children will go to the activity. Make sure you follow social distancing, and make sure that if you have any symptoms, any kind of symptoms, for example, colds or cough, that you do not go to mobilizations. So yeah. Going back. So these are the photo that you see here are women actually lining up for their government aid in front of the Department of Social Welfare and Development, because they've been waiting for, I think, 2 months, but the aid has not come. So what they did was to line up, and because they were not allowed to hold placards, or it's not part, they're not allowed to do rallies, what they did was to print their calls in recyclable bags, and then line up at the DSWD. So no one can accuse them of holding a rally or mobilization or manifestation, but they're just there, line up for their to claim their aid. So also, this is the Pride March that we did last June 26, where 20 of us were arrested. So we did follow health protocols, and fortunately, even if we followed health protocols, the police still violently dispersed us. So that's the photo on your right. And then, so it was clear that actually the aim of the police is not to ensure health of the people, but to silence people, to silence dissent. Because even online protesters, like the four of these women who did the protest inside their homes in Pandi, Bulacan, were arrested and jailed. The piston jeepney drivers who were holding placards while asking for help on the streets were also arrested. The woman here on the lower left side is an artist who just posted something. She was arrested and they filed a case against her. A teacher also who only posted something online was also arrested. So whether you're doing outside protest or online protest, you're not safe. You are not safe, not from the corona, but from the fascist government. So at the same time, we had to, yes.
If I can just interrupt,
yes,
I'm sorry, because it's very interesting, but can we give more minutes and
yes.
then we'll go over to the next?
Yeah.
Thanks.
So a lot of the young women also found the use of TikTok, Zoom, Twitter, Instagram, and other social platforms to hold actions, protests, etc. So they were very creative. So this is Parlade, who is now red tagging and attacking Gabriela and many artists who are expressing dissent and also demanding accountability from the government. So this last one, the last one is what we call now the red lipstick campaign. So this is a protest, a form of protest where women, men, and women human rights defenders, advocates for women's rights are encouraged to wear red lipstick and post it on social media and say no to red tagging and yes to red lipsticks. So yeah. That's it. I think if maybe I'll just say that this is one of the campaigns now of Gabriela is to have a solidarity to defend Filipino women, defend Gabriela. What we are asking our allies and friends to post yourselves in red lipstick or wearing red on social media and then tag us and say no to red lipstick, no to red tagging and yes to red lipstick. So thank you very much. I'm sorry if I took a lot of time.
It's okay, Joanne. It was
Yeah.
very interesting. Yeah, it's too bad we only have a short time. Huh? But
yeah, I can answer questions also.
Yeah, then that's the next step now. Now we allow our viewers, if they can still post questions on the Q&A. And I would also give time now to the three speakers to maybe ask questions to each other. If anybody has a question. If not, I have something to keep the ball rolling.
Yeah.
I mean, I have plenty of questions to ask, so I can start if you want. I had a question for everyone, but I'll start maybe with a question for you, Sophia. So globalized solidarity. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you think the pandemic has shown about the current status of international solidarity. Are there examples of the potential of international solidarity and what it can do? And maybe also the reverse, like have we seen how a lack of international solidarity can also be very devastating, especially during a pandemic such as this? So that's what I wanted to know.
It's a really, really good question because we saw both of them occurring during this pandemic. An example of I start with the last one. What we saw was a lot of some authoritarian regimes used this pandemic as an excuse, a way to pressure activism, to pressure their people. So that's one of the things that we saw. Also, yeah, but how do I say this? So that's one of the negative things. But what we saw is also the good side of international solidarity in this case. I have a really good example of the Cuban health workers when Italy was at its worst, where the EU failed to help them when it was necessary. We saw that Cuban doctors were sent to help them, to help the doctors and the nurses in Italy during this lockdown. And that's a really good example of what international solidarity should be. So it's a really short answer, but I think to have more questions, I won't elaborate too much on this question. But I have a question as well. If it's okay for you, Johan, to ask it.
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
One of the things I asked myself was what we saw that this pandemic showed is we already had a system that was broken, but now those inequalities that are a consequence of neoliberalism, capitalism, racism, fascism, just has been accentuated by the COVID-19 crisis. And what we also see now is that all of our struggles, whether it's climate change and international solidarity, but also the social movements in the Philippines, we are all connected and intertwined. And what we need is a system change, actually, and that is what this COVID-19 crisis has shown us. And one of my questions to you both is how is your organization or local group wants to tackle these challenges that are ahead of us?
Yeah, maybe I can answer first. It's okay, Jan. So for us, it's really true that what we want is a different system, a different kind of system. We already saw that the neoliberal system is not working for us. It's a failed system. But for Gabriela and many the people's movement here in the Philippines, right now, we are concentrating on maybe more on isolating the representative of, or the agent of what we call agents of neoliberalism here in the Philippines. The agent like Duterte, and also because they're using fascism to really push through with neoliberalism. So when we say building a movement, as whether here in the Philippines and solidarity movement abroad, we have to tackle both the economic side, the neoliberal side of the problem, and also the fascist side of the problem. So because changing or tackling these two problems at the same time will also put together what we have seen as a stronger movement, putting together a movement against fascism and a movement against neoliberalism. Because many times in our experience, there are organizations or movements who are only focused on human rights, and there are organizations who are only focused on economic rights. As I think Jan said also, that there shouldn't be any difference, or there should always be a link between social actions or about social issues. It's not just about climate, it's also about social justice. So I think we have to make sure that these two are linked together. So as what I said, if you are going to fight against neoliberalism, you have to fight against fascism. So yeah. But I think if Jan has something to say, then I can answer.
Yeah, it's a very difficult question to answer, of course, and I don't think I or anyone else in Students for Climate has a good, solid, single answer. But to maybe add one thing about social justice here is that I think what we have been trying to do is to flesh out also a little bit what that means, because we see that social justice increasingly becomes something that many organizations agree on, and that's really great, but it often also remains quite vague. And so one of the tasks always is in fleshing out what that really means. And I think for the situation here in Belgium and in Europe, and when it comes to the climate and what we do, Well, yeah, one of the things that we want to flesh out, I think, about social justice is the international dimension and the unequal trade relations and the kind of colonialism that still exists. Because Sophia, you talk about how do you fight sexism and fascism and racism, and of course, yeah, all of these things exist here, but they also exist on a huge scale internationally, and that's like a crucial link to combat. Because if we just focus on just the national level, the domestic level, then you're also always going to miss maybe the fundamental switch. So that's something that we've been trying to do, and I think we will continue to do. I don't have clear answers of how that works, but it's definitely one thing I wanted to add.
Yeah, and I think if I may add also, as our campaign here, for example, when we talk about defense of human rights or defense of women's right, it's not just about defending your right as a woman, but defending your right to live a quality life. The women who in the communities, urban poor communities, who are fighting for their right to stay in their communities, the peasant women who are fighting for their right to own their land, to control resources, to take control of resources from big companies. They're being attacked because they are doing this for their communities. They're fighting for their economic rights, for their right to live, for their right to development. So they're not just being attacked just because the government wants to attack them. Because we are talking about the situation, we are challenging governments, we are demanding accountability from the governments. These are the reasons why we are being attacked. So the connection between the movement, social justice, the connection and between social justice and women's rights and violence against women. It's for us, for many people, it's quite vague. But when you go to communities, it becomes clear for us. It becomes more tangible for many movements and for many women.
I'm sorry. And maybe a question to the three of you from me, because I'm hearing a lot about solidarity, how we can use this time to strengthen solidarity in communities, and also how do we see international solidarity? Are there any possibilities between, for example, we're with 3 organizations here, any possibilities that we can use during these times, that we can combine actions together, like from the Philippines and other regions to Belgium, that we can maybe use online tools to make an action more visible and also more global? What do you think? Do you see any possibilities in certain campaigns in the Philippines and Belgium?
Well, yes, of course. It's easier now because if we rely on technology. At the same time, it's also a challenge for us. But I think when you talk about building solidarity, what we have now mostly is online. So, for example, we have asked our allies to, as part of our solidarity campaign, is to wear red lipstick. That's something that everybody can do, or wear something red, something that everybody can do, because it's also I don't know, red is something that but a universal color for protest, a universal color of strength. Yeah, so for us it's quite, I think there's a big possibility to do that, to do a joint solidarity action for Palestine, actually for countries who are now in the midst of a very of the crisis, like in Nigeria, for example, in Thailand, for example, these things that we can put together and take action together online. And maybe I think I would suggest is to connect also with people from other countries also, so that we can expand our network, at the same time also hear what have been happening with them and really ask them what can we do in solidarity with them. Yeah.
Okay, how about Jan and Sophia? How do you see any opportunities, possibilities in these coming months? How we can collaborate in an international way, maybe to show international solidarity?
I think
maybe just 5 minutes, and then we'll have to round up.
I think we already did a bit of that during the COVID crisis. For us, and what Jan already also told, to accentuate certain problems that are necessary at that time. For example, the Black Lives Matter protest. It was something that happened during the pandemic, during the COVID, still is happening. But we saw that all organizations and all people were solidary with the Black Lives Matter movement, and they took the police violence, so the context of the United States, the police violence, the racism, and they reflected on it upon their own context, and they like we did with Intel Solidarity, with Intel Global Solidarity, we saw that we made the link and associated with our decolonization topics, and as Diane also said with the Students for Climate, it was the momentum to come on the streets. So I think when there's the momentum, when there is such an opportunity, we can all work together to fight these struggles. That certainly is. And BLM is one of the examples of it, that it can be international. Yeah. I don't think if Jan wants to add something.
I'll be very short. I just want to say, yeah, the answer to the question, is it possible for more collaboration on the international, is always yes. And more so, it's absolutely necessary. And yeah, that's why we have seen it. And it's always a question of doing it more. But yes, it's absolutely possible and absolutely necessary. Yeah.
Okay. I think our time is almost up. So I would like to really thank Jan, Sophia, and Joanne for being our speakers for this webinar. Thank you very much. It was very enlightening.
Thank you.
Am I still here? Yes, I think so. Okay, I would like to promote again our organizers, Intel. Just check it out, www.intel.be. You can be a member of our wonderful movement just for 20 euros a year. And also, please sign the petition again for the AXA campaign. I think the link is in the chat. Also, I would like to promote Viva Salud. Stay in touch by going on the WhatsApp group. I think the link is also there in the chat. You can support it financially by buying some really nice mouth masks with the slogan, "Only Fighters Win." And you can also check out the campaign dossier on the website. And lastly, put it on your agendas, the annual action of December 10th. It has a new name now called Defend the Defenders. So put it on your agenda, 10th of December in the evening. There will be an action, probably in Brussels, maybe in multiple locations. Hopefully we can do something offline also, but check it out. Hopefully we see each other back there. Voila, that's it. Thank you also for the viewers. I hope you have been enlightened, and we hope to see you again in a future webinar from Viva Salud and or Intel. And yeah, stay safe everyone, but fight for your rights. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.